Thank you so much for this opportunity to share my thinking on where librarians, information scientists, and knowledge managers play into our shared mission to put knowledge to work. Applying knowledge into action is the currency of a successful healthcare organisation. Taking the heavy lifting out of getting evidence into practice to improve the quality of care. NHS knowledge and library services here in England, those teams offer the gift of time to healthcare professionals. They play a pivotal role in getting evidence into practice and in mobilising computable biomedical knowledge. Now, healthcare is knowledge intensive. In the UK, there's a strong tradition of evidence-based decisions about care. It's one of the organising principles which has stood the test of time for the National Health Service. Capability to coordinate and mobilise knowledge underpins then the delivery of high-quality health services. And digital technologies now offer the promise to deliver healthcare in a more efficient and tailored basis. There is a global workforce challenge. There's a shortage of staff right across the world, and healthcare staff need to be equipped with the knowledge and the skills to be responsive to evidence, innovation, and the introduction of new technologies. Knowledge specialists play a pivotal role in getting evidence into practice, in enabling staff, patients, and the public to use knowledge, in assessing knowledge solutions, in bringing system partners together. So quality and productivity, in my view, come from putting knowledge in the hands of those who need it. And it's my belief that knowledge management and knowledge mobilisation need to come way up the agenda in order that health services can be sustained and successful going forward. For our systems to get a bang for their buck on research and to ensure that high quality evidence and knowledge flows through to decision makers, we need to invest in both computable biomedical knowledge and in proactive health knowledge and library services. So a quick look at the scope of the work of health librarians in the 2020s. You can dig into the detail of this in another time, but in summary here, you've got a focus on digital services, a focus on informing decision makers, researchers, and learners remain central. And there's an important function around training skills, training and information skills. And this extends to supporting information professionals in other sectors, people who work directly with the public, who also need to be able to spot misinformation and disinformation, and a challenge to do that in our digital age. But there's also this role in unlocking the volume of knowledge that's held within healthcare organisations and by their staff. And we see here in England a growing interest in this knowledge management function. Fostering a learning culture, managing processes that can support knowledge creation, that can help. Obviously, the curation process is storing and managing knowledge and data, and harnessing staff know-how and patient experience, the learning that we hold as humans, and capturing those lessons, turning them into resources, knowledge assets that people can use in their daily practice, and as communities, supporting learning communities coming together. Underpinning all of these roles, we see increasingly that health librarians here find more of their time is spent working with system partners to keep knowledge flowing between partners, locally, regionally, and nationally. And there's an advisory role for these teams too. So the terminology that we use for these professions is really diversified. And this chart from CILIP, the Chartered Institute of Library and Information Professionals, shows that increased diversification of information roles. You can see the emerging prominence here of information managers and data professionals, with knowledge managers right there in the midst of them, and alongside the continuing role for librarians. So I was trying to think about how I might depict this extension and expansion of roles to you, and that increasing focus on knowledge management, knowledge mobilisation. And then it occurred to me that a picture speaks 1,000 words. So I turned to the Deep AI design generator, and here we are. Here you see the output of my request for an image of a knowledge manager using a Bauhaus design. I have to say, I think this is terrific. Our knowledge manager here is very active, operating at different levels in ways that are omnidirectional, but always interconnected. And so perhaps I'd like you to hold on to that image as we think about this theme of knowledge mobilization, putting knowledge to work that brings knowledge specialists into the shared space of mobilizing computable biomedical knowledge. Now, some of the vocabulary around knowledge management and knowledge mobilization is impenetrable. We all know that. But I believe that these are really eminently practical disciplines that can be distilled into this simple ABCD. So it's about putting actionable knowledge into work, applying knowledge, building know-how, continuing to learn, driving improvement and innovation. And alongside this, I'm really convinced that we need to look behind an aspiration, almost a bit of a mantra now, to head for a data-driven health service. But what we need is an intelligent health service wherever we are in the world. And managing and mobilizing knowledge are key to that broader vision of an intelligent health service. As a profession, librarians have moved far beyond being curators of learning collections in the health services. And we now see a wide range of skilled information professionals bringing different forms of knowledge, working with different forms of knowledge, and working across boundaries. And I believe that the next frontier is a further transition from attending to knowledge management to going on to focus on knowledge mobilization. And this certainly is going to draw on implementation science as well as information science. So you may think of knowledge mobilization in terms of the functions through which knowledge is curated, created, curated, connected to those who use it, and then collected through further discovery. Or you might conceptualize it as a knowledge cycle, which takes you around a process of knowledge generation, knowledge management, knowledge exchange, knowledge transfer, knowledge translation into practice, and then background as we go from practice back to what else do we need to find out through discovery. It seems to me that as you look at these, whichever construct you're most familiar with, that computable knowledge is already an active ingredient in every dimension of this. So, really key that library and information professionals, information scientists are contributing to this broader agenda. Now, to quote Enrico, who was the vice chairman of PepsiCo, the soft stuff is always harder than the hard stuff. And certainly over the last few years in the UK, health librarians on the ground have been trained to use and facilitate a core set of knowledge management techniques, knowledge mobilization techniques. And while I'm keen, really keen, that more and more medical librarians take up their place as part of an interdisciplinary community, looking at how we get computable knowledge into work, I'm also keen to underpin all our systems, but I'm equally keen that we don't lose sight of the importance of knowledge managers sharing these kinds of practical techniques for knowledge sharing. Decisions aren't made in isolation. They need to take account of both individual and organizational knowledge, as well as the best available evidence from research. So these kinds of techniques that you can draw on at the beginning of a piece of work, peer assists, before action reviews, appreciative inquiry, very much understated, a really valuable technique. And then the ones that you can pick up while you're taking a large project or program through. The value here of communities of practice, again, really not to be underestimated, and then that learning that you can capture afterwards when you take a retrospect. So these sharing tools that help you surface and share what's in the head, what's been learned from experience, that knowledge is equally important. We should just remember that while we're focusing on what we can do through digital means, through computable knowledge. So I was asked to speak today to include sharing any lessons that I thought might be helpful for the MCBK movement in relation to the ways that librarians and information scientists work. And I'm going to look at that from two perspectives. Firstly, from the perspective of CILIP, which is the Chartered Institute of Library and Information Professionals, of which I'm proud to be Vice President. So CILIP works to enable members to develop their expertise and support library and information services to improve in every sector. And we champion right across the whole sector in which we work. We have learned that advocacy is key and that there is an eternal need to demonstrate impact, to reach out to policymakers and to look to the future. And I'd anticipate that our MCBK movement faces similar challenges going forward. So I just wanted to show you some of the toolkits that we've produced just over the last couple of years, actually, these to upskill members. So one looking at the future, really helping people to present. You can see there's presentation templates, a whole package of material behind this advocacy around where our libraries need to be positioned in the future. CILIP Connect, as you can see, Big Ben there is focused on our policymakers, on our parliamentarians. And then we have an impact toolkit produced from CILIP. I think that's really, really important. You are looking at ways of getting the message across in your own organisation and externally as well. CILIP places a really strong focus on supporting the development of our specialist workforce. And the message in these fast-paced times is that we need to skill, reskill, and reskill again. So it's really recognising the imperative to continue to develop new knowledge and skills. Equally, we're keen to support diverse and inclusive pathways, develop new pathways into the profession. And we engage with learning providers and we assure the quality of their educational programs through accreditation. So CILIP offers for individuals professional registration schemes, both for librarians and for knowledge managers, and they take us through from certification to chartership and on to fellowship of the association. Equally important is that we work with our employer members as partners to understand their changing needs across the industry and across the sector. So you've got there this focus too on attracting and developing the talent, but also retaining an agile workforce. Then the quality assurance, looking at the courses, looking at the education that's available, but all based on an understanding of what's needed in the sector and needed in industry. And similarly, I think the MCBK movement is going to be wanting to think about how professional bodies can help ensure that we can attract and retain an agile workforce. In England, the organisations that would be involved would be CILIP and FedIP, the Federation of Informatics Professionals in Health and Care. And that's a federation of organisations of which CILIP is one member. So talking about skills, the knowledge and skills base, you see here an overview of the CILIP professional knowledge and skills base. It's the skills standard for the profession. And it's a key tool to assist library and information professionals as individuals to upskill. It's a valuable tool for employers to be thinking about which of these skill sets they're looking for and whether they've got them across the whole of their team. You can see it spans data management through to knowledge management, literacies and learning. And really key is that our ethical principles as a profession are right there at the centre. And I wanted to just pause a moment and look at this issue around the ethical framework, because surely ethical implementation is a core issue for us as an MCBK movement. Every CILIP member as an individual makes a commitment to our ethical framework. It's clear and concise, and I share it with you for you to consider whether this or something similar, there are other codes available, I know, might serve MCBK well, with that focus on human rights, equalities and diversity, the public benefit and advancement of the wider good, preservation of access to knowledge, intellectual freedom, impartiality, and the avoidance of inappropriate bias. And I'm sure that's been a key theme through today. And the confidentiality of information provided by individuals, the development of the necessary information skills and literacies. So all wrapped up in our ethical framework is that personal, professional commitment. CIDP also commissions research as needed, and published in 2021. This report looks at the impact of technology, AI, robotics, automation on the library and knowledge services professions. It followed on, in fact, from the publication of the Topol Review, which looked at preparing the healthcare workforce for the digital future in England in 2019. So this report, sponsored by the National Health Service, because it's such an important issue, and then obviously rolling out into the wider profession, looks at these issues, and it found a really strong alignment between the existing skill set of library and information professionals and the demands of new technologies. It saw that the applications were widespread and would be impacting on user interactions with services, and the skills that people who use knowledge bases work often don't even know they're coming from libraries, of course, because they're on the intranet or available to them through a portal, and they may perhaps not even know that knowledge and library specialists involved in procuring this stuff, commissioning it, making it available, all the rest, and connecting it into multiple things that allow them to download, e-copies, for example. So all this piece now sits with that spectrum of the information professions. But anyway, these technologies impacting on users, on the knowledge itself, search, systematic review, I'll come back to that in a moment. And as I say, on these services, the automation of routine processes, collection, stock management, and so on. So looking forward then, the report was also quite clear about new skill sets that knowledge and library specialists would need to thrive. And while people in this conference will all have a passionate interest in mobilizing computable knowledge, we are all necessarily needing to keep up with the pace ourselves and gain new skills. But for the library and information sector, the key focus is on computational sense, data literacy, data science, and data stewardship. And we've already made progress around that, working as a professional body through our special interest groups, in dialogue with our educational institutions, training providers, and with employer partners, and looking to cross-fertilize and share as much of learning and opportunity as possible as we've created new learning opportunities. And as I've already indicated, CIDP takes an overview of roles in the sector, and we've already been seeing new roles emerge, actually over some long time. For example, the data librarian role. Data librarians engaged in managing research data, using that data as a resource and supporting researchers. So this is one of the many role descriptions that's held on the CIDP website, and talks about the kinds of things that people will be doing, getting involved in data management plans, storing and managing data, looking at retention, disposal periods, all that kind of stuff, as well as focusing on copyright, IP, licensing. I also think that increasingly health librarians are advising organizations, helping to review new products that people are looking at, new knowledge solutions, and that's an important area too. So I wanted to move on to share, if I may, lessons learned from another perspective, and I thought it might be helpful to offer some observations from the strategic approach taken by the National NHS Knowledge and Library Services team in implementing the Knowledge for Healthcare strategy, which we first launched in England in 2015. So I'm drawing here on my experience as former Chief Knowledge Officer for the NHS in England, a role that I left in May, and I'm delighted to say that Louise Goswami is now Chief Knowledge Officer for the NHS in England. But here I'm drawing on the observations of my own, and also on shared work that we have done over the last 10 years. So anything that we do, so this is an example then of taking a strategic approach. So number one lesson for all of us is that large-scale change takes time. And we also need to draw on all the tools in the box, from implementation science, from quality improvement, and from change management, in order to really take on board the human factors of change, as well as to address any technical barriers. And this issue of resource discovery, getting computable knowledge flowing, is a major issue. It is only yet one strand of the work. So speaking from my perspective as former CKO, with my colleagues, I worked hard to generate as many policy hooks, levers, incentives, drivers as possible of positive change as possible to help us achieve our ambition. Now, we're in the business, in the health service and here as MCBK, of getting people to be able to use the right knowledge and right evidence at the right time. And it's all about supporting high quality decision making. And so this slide represents some of the ongoing work that's been delivered over that last decade, from the publication of the first iteration of Knowledge for Healthcare in 2015. I think it's really key to give people in different places and tiers of the system as many tools, angles that they can use as catalysts for dialogue with senior leaders, with policy leaders, that they can pull into business cases. So I'm just going to pull out 2 or 3 points from this. So in terms of legislation, the duty to use evidence from research is explicit in the knowledge in the Health and Care Act 2022, just check the date, 2022. And that's a duty set upon the Secretary of State for Health, actually, and therefore on all staff in the health service to use evidence from research. It's an explicit duty. The national Knowledge and Library Service team, has expanded a core collection of digital knowledge resources available to all staff in the NHS, and that's integrated into national and local available resources discoverable through a single hub. I think that we must remember to achieve equity of access for healthcare staff as part of our wider efforts focused on patient outcomes. In terms of regulation, in England, the Care Quality Commission is a key regulator, and it issued guidance this spring around what a well-led organisation looks like. It's really explicit about the importance of access to up-to-date guidance on quality standards and good practice. It talks about the place of library knowledge services, that it's important that they function well alongside information governance, clinical internal audit, and so on. So it's very explicit. And I just want to share that it took us 6 years as a team to get the wording into the CQC guidance agreed and published. Admittedly, COVID came along in the middle, but nevertheless, 6 years to get that done. And then while we're busy leading this type of strategic approach, new tools like large language models just come over the horizon, creating new energy, new opportunities, and of course, new concerns. So I wanted to turn to their potential for knowledge and library services and specialists as I start to come to a close of this session. By training and applying LLMs to routine, mundane, repetitive tasks, I see that librarians and information specialists can make their services more efficient and release time, enabling personnel to extend the reach of our services. The phrase that we've used for this for some time in my former team is that we're looking to reach from board to ward. We want to mobilise information from the executive through to people working and staffing with patients on the ward. So what lies ahead? great paper here from Matus Formanek, and I invite you to read that. He published a systematic review of the potential applications from LLMs to knowledge and library services. Of course, we all recognise that there's a multitude of technical, ethical, legal, and other dimensions inherent to their use that have got to be sorted out. But generative AI tools are becoming increasingly sophisticated, and gradually developers are overcoming the initial technical issues and limitations. It's well worth reading Formanek's paper to review the key applications of LLMs that he identifies. But, you know, you can see this piece, that there's this journey forward that entails grappling with, you know, admittedly substantial technical barriers and complexities. We need thorough research. It's got to be done proactively and properly if we're going to avoid premature deployment of solutions. But as this stuff is resolved, you know, our world is going to look very different. Already we can envisage really widespread adoption of these tools. We can see all sorts of practical things, and LLMs being a bridge linking information, content, users to meet their information requirements. It's an exciting time. So yeah, by all means, go and look at Formanek on where he sees LLMs being used. But I was equally interested to know what ChatGPT would say. So this is the question that I put. In which specific domains, tasks or scenarios linked to library and information services or knowledge solutions can the proficiencies and capabilities of LLMs be harnessed? And you can see here inquiries, cataloging, search, user education, summarizing, personalization, transcription and translation. That's a big area for addressing health inequalities, being much more inclusive in terms of our customer service too. Digital preservation, community engagement, and research assistance. There's a massive amount there. That answer actually from ChatGPT, it looks great, you know, but the complexity of procurement isn't in there. The complexity of copyright isn't in there. I think it underplays health and digital literacy, doesn't really think about those kinds of skills, all of which are key. So, you know, it's an interesting list, but it's incomplete, and we need to bear that in mind. But I want to go on quickly to look at just a couple of examples of knowledge solutions and how their developers are thinking about using large language models, and how indeed they are using LLMs. So I think it's a bit like fusion cooking. It's going to be the fusion of new technologies that will bring some of the most powerful benefits. BMJ Clinical Intelligence is a knowledge graph designed to overcome some of the limitations of traditional rule-based systems. And this is a white paper from Blackford Middleton and Kieran Walsh, and it looks at the potential to marry LLMs with knowledge graphs. In essence, it's looking to see how these things might be used together in point of care and population health workflows to drive better health outcomes. And you can see here some of the ways in which this might be used. LLM might be guided by structured knowledge. The knowledge graph can validate and check for the output from LLMs to together improve this business of getting accurate attribution of references and source materials. So it's a fusion model and what can be done if the two work together. Meanwhile, in the here and now, large language models are being used as a research tool. And I'm grateful to Alon and Ethan Agai from Pico Portal for allowing me to share a couple of their slides. And what you see here is a systematic literature review platform, which is already leveraging the benefits of machine learning and AI. So this is just one example here, but the system will offer you additional keywords when you're searching, from which the human operator can then select whether to include in their search or not. It's very transparent. You can switch this button on or off. Control sits with the knowledge specialist or researcher, and then you can choose or not choose whether to use it. So very much control, addressing many of the concerns that we hear about the application of these tools. And then always keeping the human in the loop. So as part of the screening papers, the knowledge specialist or researcher, just as one example of this, will want to know how a clinical trial was set up. So they might ask, was the allocation sequence concealed until participants were enrolled and assigned to interventions? So here you can see the AI will offer an answer. The tool here will offer you an answer, and the knowledge specialist can easily verify it, because at the same time, it highlights the source text from which this has been drawn. So the PICO team have been very, very responsive to my many questions about how they're using AI, about the opportunities of managing the risks. And so I asked them about their views as to how we as a movement, how others should be thinking about this. And they made 2 or 3 interesting comments. So an increase in the broad application of AI requires an increase in effort to addressing potential risks. So we need to weight those appropriately. Transparency, a transparent approach, rolling out features that enhance outcomes without negative impacts, really ensuring that people who use these systems can verify the data that they're being shown by triangulating responses. And the AI is there to assist. It's about maintaining human involvement, enabling humans to have control of the use of this. And they also spoke about tolerance towards AI, identifying tasks where tolerance for AI errors is acceptable, absolutely avoiding tasks where precision is critical and tolerance is unacceptable, has to be, totally minimal. So in essence, it seems to me clear that there is enormous potential for computable knowledge and for tools like LLMs to help us and to work for the benefit of humankind. But it is for we somewhat frail humans to choose how to implement this great potential. We need to be proactive if we are not to leave behind the very people who are most in need of healthcare, for whatever reasons, whether that's access, inherent bias in the research, inherent bias in service delivery, whatever it is. And Rodriguez, who talks about leveraging large language models to foster equity in healthcare, is clear that there is great potential for LLMs to help us, but only if health equity is in our line of sight, is in our focus from the start, and that we must prioritize their use for health equity efforts if there's going to be a really positive impact on health equity. So I think some really important points there. Meanwhile, of course, as we move together, we need to keep in mind the human factors of change. That needs to be front and center if we are to resist the call of the status quo. I'm already using this spoon. Why would I need a shovel? The volume of knowledge that we are moving through our systems, its exponential growth, is reason enough to turn to the shovel. So in summary, I can assure you that health librarians and knowledge managers share the belief of MCBK that every decision affecting the health of individuals and populations should be informed by the best available knowledge. I encourage you to reach out to knowledge and library specialists and knowledge managers if you're not working with them already. Invite them to bring their skills to the party, to work alongside clinicians, clinical informaticists, and wider health informaticians who are similarly committed to mobilizing commutable knowledge. Together, we are on a mission to put knowledge to work, to underpin better decisions, and achieve safer, better healthcare. Thank you.